The glass doors of the Grand Meridian Hotel swing open with a soft whisper, and Amara Thompson steps into the marble-floored lobby that sparkles under crystal chandeliers. At 38, she carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who has fought for every achievement, her tailored Chanel blazer and Hermes bag speaking to success earned through relentless determination. The hotel buzzes with the refined chatter of wealthy guests, their designer luggage wheeled past by attentive bellhops. Amara approaches the reception desk, her Louboutin heels clicking softly against the polished floor. The woman behind the counter, Karen Mitchell, glances up with a practiced smile that freezes the moment her eyes take in Amara's appearance. The smile doesn't quite reach her eyes as they sweep from Amara's carefully styled hair down to her expensive accessories. "Good afternoon," Amara says warmly, setting her designer purse on the marble counter. "I have a reservation under Thompson." Karen's fingers hover over the keyboard, but instead of typing, she leans back slightly. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right place? Our rooms start at $800 per night." The question hangs in the air like an accusation disguised as concern. Before Amara can respond, a security guard materializes beside the desk. James Wilson, his badge gleaming under the lobby lights, studies Amara with undisguised suspicion. "Miss, we need to check your bag. There have been reports of stolen items in the area, and that purse matches a description we received." Amara's eyebrows raise slightly, but her voice remains steady. "I'm sorry, but this is my personal property. I'm a registered guest here." "People like you don't usually carry items this expensive," Karen interjects, her voice carrying a tone that makes nearby guests turn their heads. "Where did you really get these things?" On the wall-mounted television behind the reception desk, a news ticker scrolls past announcing, "Amara Thompson, youngest black female CEO to lead hotel empire, completes major acquisition." The irony is lost on everyone except Amara, who glances at the screen with the faintest hint of a smile touching her lips. The security guard steps closer, his hand resting on his radio. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside while we sort this out. These items are suspiciously expensive for someone of your demographic." You won't believe what happens when they discover who they just accused of theft is actually their new boss. Amara adjusts the strap of her bag and takes a measured breath, her legal training from Harvard kicking in as she processes the situation unfolding before her. She dressed deliberately casual today for her undercover evaluation of the property. No flashy jewelry, no obvious displays of wealth beyond the quality pieces she always wears. The irony isn't lost on her that her attempt to blend in has made her a target instead. "I understand your security concerns," she says calmly, "but I assure you these are my belongings. Perhaps we could verify my reservation first." Karen's fingers finally move to the keyboard, but her typing is deliberately slow, each keystroke an exercise in reluctance. "What did you say the name was again? Thompson?" She draws out the name as if tasting something unpleasant. "And you're sure you can afford our presidential suite? That's $1,200 per night." Amara watches as a middle-aged white woman approaches the adjacent counter, her worn Louis Vuitton bag, clearly a well-used authentic piece, immediately garnering warm smiles from the staff. The contrast is stark and deliberate. The woman is greeted with enthusiasm, offered champagne, and whisked away to her room without a single question about her ability to pay or the authenticity of her belongings. "Ma'am, this black American Express card," Karen continues, holding Amara's credit card between two fingers as if it might contaminate her. "These are often reported stolen. We'll need to run additional verification." Security Chief James Wilson circles closer, his presence meant to intimidate. "We've had issues with women using fake designer items to appear wealthy and commit fraud. It's more common than you'd think, especially with people who don't typically belong in establishments like this." The words sting with their practiced delivery, suggesting this isn't the first time such accusations have been made. Amara notices how other guests begin to stare, some pulling out phones to record what they assume is the apprehension of a suspected criminal. "I'd be happy to provide additional identification," Amara offers, reaching for her wallet. "I have several forms of ID if that would help." "Oh, we'll need more than that," Karen replies with false sweetness. "Proof of employment, bank statements, explanation of how someone your age acquired this kind of money. Single women like you don't usually have this level of wealth legitimately." The comment combines racial and gender bias in one poisonous package, and Amara feels the familiar burn of discrimination that has followed her throughout her career. She thinks of the late nights building her hospitality empire, the boardroom meetings where she was the only black face, the constant need to prove herself worthy of spaces others took for granted. James's radio crackles, and he speaks into it loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "We may have a situation in the lobby. Suspected theft and fraud. Request backup." As Amara stands there, maintaining her dignity while being publicly humiliated, she quietly observes every detail: the name tags, the security camera positions, the reactions of staff and guests. Her legal mind catalogues each instance of discriminatory treatment, building what she knows will become an ironclad case. What she doesn't say aloud is that this hotel chain was the subject of 17 discrimination complaints in the past 2 years. And that's exactly why she bought it this morning. The situation escalates as more hotel staff emerge from behind counters and service stations, drawn by the commotion like sharks sensing blood in the water. Amara finds herself the center of unwanted attention as employees whisper among themselves, their glances sharp with judgment and assumption. "Ma'am, we have multiple reports of stolen luxury goods matching exactly what you're carrying," James announces, his voice carrying across the lobby. "That Hermes bag, those shoes, even that watch, all high-end items that have been reported missing from hotels in the area." Amara's composure remains unshaken, though inside she marvels at the creativity of their accusations. "Officer Wilson," she says, reading his name tag carefully. "These are false allegations. I can provide receipts for every item I'm wearing." "Receipts can be faked," Karen interjects from behind the counter, her phone already pressed to her ear. "Hello, police. We have a suspected thief at the Grand Meridian Hotel. She's attempting to use stolen credit cards and is in possession of multiple stolen luxury items." The words "suspected thief" echo through the marble-columned space, causing well-dressed guests to step back and create a wide circle around Amara. She notices how some pull out their phones to record, their faces eager with the anticipation of witnessing a criminal being apprehended. "Young black women like her often target wealthy hotels," James explains to gathering onlookers, his voice carrying the authority of someone who believes completely in his own prejudice. "They find victims to scam or steal from guests. It's an organized operation." An older white woman in pearls nods knowingly. "I thought something was off about her. She was trying too hard to look rich. You can always tell when they don't belong." Amara's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly, but her voice remains level. "I understand you have security protocols, but these accusations are baseless and discriminatory. I'd like to speak with your general manager immediately." "The general manager doesn't meet with suspected criminals," Karen snaps back, her false politeness now completely abandoned. "You need to cooperate with our investigation before we'll consider anything else." James steps closer, his bulk meant to intimidate. "Miss, the smart thing to do right now would be to admit what you've done. Tell us where you got these items, and maybe we can work something out before the police arrive." "I got them by earning the money to buy them," Amara replies quietly, her dignity intact despite the circus surrounding her. "Through hard work, education, and building a successful business." The honesty of her response seems to anger Karen further. "Girls like you always have some sob story. Where did you really get these things? What old white man did you scam to afford designer goods? The racist and sexist implications of the comment draw shocked gasps from some guests, though others nod in agreement. Amara realizes she's witnessing the worst kind of intersectional discrimination, assumptions about her race, gender, and worthiness all colliding in a perfect storm of bias. As sirens wail in the distance, growing closer, Amara discreetly pulls out her phone and sends a single text message. Rachel, execute Code Red Protocol, downtown property. They've made a catastrophic error. She slides the phone back into her purse just as James reaches for it. That's evidence in our theft investigation, he declares, but Amara's message has already been sent. What James doesn't know is that Code Red Protocol involves the immediate deployment of Amara's legal team, her public relations specialists, and the activation of acquisition paperwork that was finalized just 4 hours ago. The message that just went out will change everything, but for now, Amara waits with the patience of someone who knows that justice, while sometimes delayed, is always worth the wait. The hotel guests continue to stare and whisper, assuming they're watching the downfall of a criminal. They have no idea they're actually witnessing the moment everything changes for the Grand Meridian Hotel, and not in the way they expect. The police sirens grow louder as 2 squad cars pull up to the hotel's circular drive, their red and blue lights painting the lobby windows in alternating colors of authority. Amara watches through the glass as officers Martinez and Johnson emerge from their vehicles, their faces already set with the presumption of guilt that comes from a dispatch call about a suspected thief. "This is it," James announces to the crowd with obvious satisfaction. "Officers, we have your suspect right here." The uniformed police enter the lobby with purposeful strides, their presence immediately commanding attention from every guest and staff member present. Officer Martinez, a stocky man with graying temples, approaches Amara with his hand resting on his duty belt. "Ma'am, you're being accused of grand theft, credit card fraud, and identity theft," he states in a voice that carries across the marble space. "I need you to place your hands behind your back." "Officers, these accusations are completely false," Amara responds, her voice steady despite the humiliation of being handcuffed in front of dozens of witnesses. "I'm innocent of all charges and request immediate legal representation." Karen steps forward eagerly, her role as chief accuser now official. She's been acting suspicious since she arrived, claiming to own expensive items that are clearly stolen. We have multiple witnesses who saw her behaving strangely. "That's right," chimes in the woman with pearls, stepping closer to the officers. "I saw her looking around nervously, definitely casing the place for robbery. She doesn't belong in a place like this." James produces a jewelry box from Amara's luggage with theatrical flourish. This watch matches a stolen property report from another hotel. She's probably part of an organized theft ring targeting luxury establishments. The accusations pile up like a prosecution's opening statement, each one more creative than the last. Officer Johnson examines the watch with the expertise of someone who wouldn't know a Patek Philippe from a Timex, but nods seriously anyway. "Grand theft, organized retail crime, fraud, possibly even drug trafficking," Martinez lists off as he tightens the handcuffs. "Ma'am, you're looking at decades in prison for these charges." The crowd of onlookers has grown larger, phones recording every moment of what they believe is justice being served. Some guests openly applaud the hotel staff for their vigilance in protecting them from this dangerous criminal. People like her think they can just take whatever they want and play the victim when caught. Karen announces to the crowd, her voice carrying the moral authority of someone convinced of her own righteousness. "Well, not in our establishment." Amara maintains her composure, despite the handcuffs cutting into her wrists and the dozens of camera phones pointed in her direction. "Officers, I invoke my constitutional rights and demand to speak with my attorney immediately." "Save it for the judge," James sneers. We have security footage, witnesses, everything we need. Your lawyer can visit you in jail." What none of them notice is Amara's phone, still tucked in her purse, lighting up with incoming messages. Rachel Morrison, her executive assistant, is receiving updates from the legal team, the PR department, and most importantly, from the hotel's corporate offices, where the morning's acquisition paperwork has just been processed and filed. The messages flooding in contain information that will turn this public humiliation into a lawsuit worth millions. But for now, Amara endures the degradation with the quiet strength of someone who knows that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried under prejudice and assumption. As Officer Martinez reads her Miranda rights in front of the jeering crowd, Amara thinks about all the other innocent people who have stood in her position without the resources to fight back. Today's injustice will become tomorrow's catalyst for change, but first, she must survive the storm that's about to break over everyone who participated in this travesty. The hotel staff beam with pride, congratulating themselves on catching a dangerous criminal. They have no idea that in exactly 7 minutes, their world is about to turn completely upside down. The handcuffs bite into Amara's wrists as Officer Martinez guides her toward a chair in the center of the lobby, making her a public spectacle for the entertainment of hotel guests and staff. The crowd has grown to nearly 50 people, their phones held high to capture what they believe is the dramatic conclusion of a crime in progress. "Sit down and don't move," Martinez instructs, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "We're going to search through all of your belongings piece by piece until we find everything you've stolen." Karen produces a notepad with obvious relish, ready to document each stolen item as evidence. "Officers, she claimed to be a business traveler. But look at her. Does she look like someone who could afford to stay in our presidential suite?" The question hangs in the air like poison, its racist implications clear to everyone present. Some guests nod in agreement, while others shift uncomfortably, sensing that something isn't quite right about the situation, but uncertain what to do about it. James begins emptying Amara's purse item by item, holding up each piece for the crowd to see. Chanel lipstick, $60. Hermes wallet, $800. Keys to what's probably a stolen car. He pauses dramatically at each item, building a case from consumer goods. "The watch alone is worth $20,000, he announces, removing the Patek Philippe from her wrist with ceremony. Nobody her age earns this kind of money legitimately. She's either stealing or involved in drug dealing. Officer Johnson examines Amara's identification with theatrical suspicion. "This driver's license could be fake. Identity theft is a federal crime, ma'am. You're racking up charges faster than we can count them." A new voice joins the chorus of accusers as the hotel's assistant manager, David Torres, emerges from the back office. "I've been monitoring the situation from security cameras," he announces importantly. Her behavior has been suspicious from the moment she entered. She was clearly casing our guests and looking for opportunities to steal. The lies compound upon themselves, each accusation more creative than the last. Amara sits in enforced silence, her legal mind cataloguing every violation of her civil rights, every false statement that will later become evidence in what she knows will be a career-ending lawsuit for everyone involved. "Ma'am, we found something interesting," Martinez says, producing a credit card from her wallet with obvious satisfaction. "This Black American Express card is reported as stolen from a hotel in Chicago just last week." The accusation is completely fabricated, but the crowd gasps appropriately, and phones capture every moment of the false revelation. Amara's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. She knows that particular card was issued to her personally by the bank president, who happens to be a Harvard Law School classmate. "That's it," Karen declares triumphantly. "Credit card fraud, identity theft, grand larceny, organized retail crime. She's going away for a very long time." The guests begin to disperse, satisfied that justice is being served and eager to share their videos on social media. The hashtags are already being created. #Hotel Thief, #Justice Served, #Busted at Meridian. Within minutes, the videos will go viral, cementing what appears to be the definitive capture of a sophisticated criminal. "Officers, we appreciate your quick response," James tells the police with obvious satisfaction. "The Grand Meridian Hotel takes security very seriously. We can't have people like her thinking they can prey on our legitimate guests." Amara finally speaks, her voice cutting through the celebration like a blade. "Officer Martinez, before you process these charges, I strongly recommend you verify the accusations being made. False reporting is also a crime." "Save the legal advice for your public defender," Martinez responds dismissively. "We have witnesses, evidence, and a confession from your own behavior. This is an open and shut case, d'Arsecar." What Officer Martinez doesn't see is the black sedan pulling up to the hotel's entrance, its windows tinted dark enough to conceal the occupants inside. What he doesn't know is that the license plate belongs to one of the most prestigious law firms in the city, and that the people stepping out of that car have just received a code-red emergency call that will change everything. The phone in Amara's purse, still buzzing with incoming messages, contains information that will turn this moment of triumph for the hotel staff into the beginning of their professional destruction. But for now, they continue to celebrate their victory, unaware that the biggest reversal in the Grand Meridian Hotel's history is walking through the front doors at this very moment. The crowd cheers as Officer Martinez begins to escort Amara toward the police car, but their celebration is about to be interrupted by an entrance that will redefine everything they think they know about power, justice, and the cost of prejudice. The hotel's revolving doors spin with unusual force as a phalanx of 6 attorneys in immaculate suits strides into the lobby, their presence immediately commanding attention from every person in the marble-columned space. Leading them is Diana Rodriguez, former federal judge and now senior partner at Morrison, Rodriguez and Associates, her silver hair and commanding presence radiating the kind of authority that makes even police officers straighten their postures. "Officers, release Ms. Amara Thompson immediately." Diana's voice cuts through the lobby chatter like a judicial gavel. "You are currently detaining the Chief Executive Officer of Thompson Hospitality Group." Officer Martinez pauses mid-step, his hand still gripping Amara's arm. "Ma'am, this woman is accused of multiple felonies. We can't just—" "This woman owns this hotel as of 8 o'clock this morning." Diana interrupts, producing a leather portfolio thick with legal documents. "Your criminal is actually your new employer." The silence that follows is so complete that the gentle tinkling of the lobby's fountain sounds like thunder. Karen's notepad slips from her suddenly nerveless fingers, and James's face drains of all color as the implications begin to register. Diana continues with prosecutorial precision. Ms. Thompson completed the acquisition of the Grand Meridian Hotel and its parent company for $750 million. The paperwork was filed with the state this morning at 8:15 a.m. General Manager Robert Chen, summoned by the emergency calls flooding the hotel's management offices, rushes into the lobby just in time to hear Diana's announcement. His face goes from confusion to horror to absolute terror in the span of 3 seconds. "Miss Thompson," he whispers, his voice barely audible. You're our new owner." Amara stands slowly as Officer Martinez removes the handcuffs, her wrists bearing the red marks of restraint, but her dignity intact. "Good afternoon, Mr. Chen. I believe we need to have a conversation about your hotel's customer service standards." Diana gestures to her legal team, each attorney representing a different specialty: civil rights law, corporate litigation, criminal defense, and media relations. "Officers, my client has been falsely imprisoned, subjected to racial and gender discrimination, and publicly humiliated based on completely fabricated charges." The crowd of guests who had been cheering moments before now stands in stunned silence, phone still recording but capturing a very different story than they expected. The viral videos that seemed destined to show justice being served will instead document one of the most spectacular reversals of fortune in recent memory. Ms. Thompson owns 31 luxury hotels across 12 states, Diana announces to the assembled crowd. This property is her newest acquisition, purchased specifically to address ongoing discrimination complaints that the previous management failed to resolve. Amara speaks for the first time since the lawyers arrived, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who no longer needs to prove her worthiness to anyone. I've been conducting undercover evaluations of systemic bias in the hospitality industry. Today's experience exceeded my worst expectations. Officer Johnson, now understanding the magnitude of the mistake, approaches with obvious trepidation. Ms. Thompson, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. We acted on information provided by hotel staff. Information that was entirely fabricated, Diana interjects sharply. False reporting to police, conspiracy to file false charges, violation of civil rights under federal law. The criminal exposure here is substantial. Karen attempts to speak, her voice shaking. Ms. Thompson, I didn't know. We were just following security protocols. Security protocols that apparently involve assuming every black woman carrying expensive items must be a criminal. Amara responds quietly. Protocols that include fabricating theft reports and planting evidence in my luggage. The jewelry box that James had produced with such theatrical flourish now sits on the reception counter like radioactive material. Everyone in the lobby understands that it represents evidence of criminal misconduct by hotel staff, not by their victim. Diana addresses the crowd directly, her voice carrying the moral authority of someone who has spent decades fighting for justice. Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed a textbook case of racial and gender discrimination. Ms. Thompson was accused of stealing her own property, arrested in her own hotel, and subjected to public humiliation for the crime of being a successful black woman. The guests who had been recording with glee now look uncertain, some deleting videos, while others recognize that they've captured something historically significant. The moment when prejudice collided with power and lost spectacularly. Amara looks around the lobby that she now owns, at the staff who minutes ago were celebrating her arrest, at the guests who had assumed the worst about her based on nothing but appearance and bias. Her voice, when she speaks, carries the weight of someone who has transformed personal trauma into systemic change. This hotel will undergo immediate and comprehensive reform. Every employee will receive training on unconscious bias, discrimination law, and proper customer service. Those who participated in today's events will face appropriate consequences. The power has shifted so completely that the air itself seems different. Where minutes ago Amara was a suspected criminal, she now stands revealed as the most powerful person in the building, and everyone who participated in her humiliation is about to learn that actions have consequences, especially when those actions target someone with the resources to ensure that justice is not just served, but witnessed by millions. The transformation in the lobby's atmosphere is immediate and absolute. Where moments before Karen, James, and David had stood as triumphant defenders of justice, they now huddle together like defendants awaiting sentencing. The cruel irony is not lost on anyone present. The people who had been so eager to see Amara arrested are now facing the very real possibility of criminal charges themselves. Karen Mitchell, James Wilson, David Torres. Amara's voice cuts through the shocked silence with surgical precision. Your employment with Thompson Hospitality Group is terminated immediately, effective this moment. Diana steps forward with a legal document that she hands to General Manager Chen. This is a formal notice of termination for cause, including gross misconduct, discrimination, and filing false police reports. Security will escort them from the premises immediately. The color drains from Karen's face as the reality of her situation crashes over her like a wave. "Miss Thompson, please, I have a family. I need this job. I didn't know who you were. You didn't know who I was, but you knew what you were doing." Amara responds with quiet intensity. "You knew you were treating me differently because of my race and gender. You knew you were fabricating evidence. You knew you were filing false police reports." James attempts to salvage something from the wreckage of his career. "Ma'am, I was just doing my job, following security protocols. Your job was to ensure guest safety, not to profile and harass customers based on racial bias." Diana interjects sharply. "What you did was commit multiple felonies while violating federal civil rights laws." Officer Martinez, now fully understanding his role in the debacle, approaches with obvious reluctance. "Ms. Thompson, given the circumstances, we'll need statements from everyone involved. The false reporting charges alone could result in significant criminal penalties." David Torres, who had been so eager to provide evidence from security cameras, now faces the prospect of those same cameras being used against him. "The footage will show that we were just being cautious. The footage will show that you targeted a customer for harassment based on race and gender, then fabricated criminal charges when she refused to be intimidated." Diana responds coldly. "That footage is now evidence in what will be a very public criminal prosecution." The legal consequences begin to cascade as Diana's team springs into action. One attorney is already on the phone with the State Attorney General's office, another is preparing civil rights violation complaints, and a third is documenting every aspect of the incident for the federal lawsuit that will follow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Diana addresses the crowd of guests who have been recording everything, "what you've witnessed today will result in criminal charges against hotel staff for conspiracy, false reporting, and civil rights violations. The videos you've taken will likely be subpoenaed as evidence." The guests who had been so eager to capture what they thought was justice being served now realize they've documented something entirely different: the systematic destruction of several careers through a combination of prejudice and stupidity. General Manager Chen, desperately trying to salvage the hotel's reputation, approaches Amara with obvious panic. "Ms. Thompson, please, perhaps we can resolve this privately. The hotel is prepared to offer compensation." "Mr. Chen, your employment is also terminated." Amara states matter-of-factly. "Any manager who allows this level of discrimination to flourish in their establishment is not qualified to work in hospitality. The professional destruction is swift and complete. Within minutes, hotel security, new security, called in from Thompson Hospitality's corporate offices, escorts the terminated employees from the premises. Karen is crying, James is arguing futilely with anyone who will listen, and David is already on his phone trying to call other hotels for employment, unaware that his actions today will make him unemployable in the hospitality industry. The financial consequences extend beyond employment," Diana explains to the assembled crowd, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has prosecuted major civil rights cases. "False imprisonment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We're looking at damages in the millions of dollars." The viral videos that had started as documentation of a criminal arrest have already been reposted thousands of times with new context. Hotel staff falsely arrest their own black female owner. The narrative has completely reversed, and the same social media that was meant to celebrate the capture of a thief is now amplifying a story of injustice and redemption. Professional licenses will be revoked, future employment in hospitality will be impossible, and the legal fees alone will bankrupt most of the individuals involved. Diana continues with clinical precision. "This is what happens when prejudice meets accountability." Amara watches the proceedings with the satisfaction of someone who has spent her entire career fighting against exactly this kind of treatment. The hotel that had just tried to destroy her reputation is now under her complete control, and the people who had participated in her humiliation are facing the consequences of their actions. Justice, as it turns out, can be swift and thorough when it has the resources to enforce itself properly. As the immediate chaos subsides and the terminated employees are escorted from the building, Amara stands in the center of the lobby that is now undeniably hers. The crowd of guests has thinned, but those who remain seem drawn to witness whatever comes next in this extraordinary reversal of fortune. She takes a moment to collect herself, the weight of the morning's events settling over her like a familiar burden she has carried for most of her professional life. "I want to share something with all of you," Amara begins, her voice carrying across the marble space with quiet authority. What happened here today wasn't an aberration or a misunderstanding. It was the predictable result of systemic bias that black women face every single day. She gestures toward the spot where she had been handcuffed just minutes before. As a black woman in business, I face what researchers call intersectional discrimination, prejudice that combines racial bias with gender stereotypes to create unique vulnerabilities. Today you witnessed exactly how dangerous that combination can be. An older gentleman in an expensive suit steps forward from the crowd. "Miss Thompson, I have to ask, why didn't you just identify yourself immediately? This could have been avoided." Amara's smile is tinged with the sadness of someone who has heard this question too many times. "Sir, that question reveals exactly the problem we're trying to solve. Why should I have to prove my worthiness to exist in a space? Why should my presence in a luxury hotel require special justification that isn't demanded of others?" Diana, still standing beside her client, adds professional context. "Ms. Thompson purchased this hotel specifically because it had received 17 discrimination complaints in the past 2 years. Today's undercover evaluation was designed to assess whether those complaints represented isolated incidents or systemic problems. The answer," Amara continues, "is now documented on dozens of phones and security cameras. The bias here wasn't subtle or hidden, it was blatant, aggressive, and criminal." A young woman in the crowd raises her hand tentatively. "What happens to the hotel now?" "Comprehensive reform," Amara responds immediately. "Every employee will receive mandatory training on unconscious bias, cultural competency, and federal civil rights law. We'll implement new hiring practices that prioritize diversity at every level, especially in management and security positions." She walks toward the reception desk where Karen had stood so smugly just an hour before. "We'll also establish partnerships with organizations that support black women entrepreneurs and other underrepresented groups in business. This hotel will become a model for how the hospitality industry should operate." An elderly woman approaches hesitantly. "Ms. Thompson, I have to admit, I was one of the people who assumed you were guilty. I'm ashamed of that now. What can people like me do to be better?" Amara's expression softens at the genuine contrition in the woman's voice. "Thank you for your honesty. The first step is recognizing that bias exists in all of us. The second step is choosing to examine our assumptions instead of acting on them automatically. When you see someone who doesn't look like you in a space where they're unexpected," she continues, "ask yourself why they seem out of place to you. Question whether your assumptions are based on facts or stereotypes. And most importantly, treat everyone with the dignity and respect you'd want for yourself." Diana addresses the broader implications. "This incident will become a case study in business schools and law schools across the country. It demonstrates both the persistence of discrimination and the importance of economic empowerment as a tool for creating change." "That's perhaps the most important lesson here," Amara adds. "When marginalized people gain economic power, we can eliminate the systems that have oppressed us. I didn't just buy this hotel as an investment. I bought it as an instrument of change." She looks around the lobby, seeing it now not as the scene of her humiliation, but as the foundation for something better. Every black woman who stays here, every person of color who feels welcome in this space, every employee who learns to see past their biases, That's how we create lasting change. The pain of today's experience will fade, she concludes. But the reforms we implement here will protect countless others from facing what I've faced. That's what makes it worthwhile. The crowd disperses slowly, many guests approaching to offer personal apologies or to express support for her plans. The lobby, which had been filled with hostility and suspicion just hours before, now buzzes with conversations about bias, justice, and the responsibility each person has to create a more equitable world. Amara Thompson, who had entered this hotel as a suspected criminal, now stands in it as both owner and educator, having transformed a moment of personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic change. Loi keo goi handong and treo chok, as the afternoon sun streams through the Grand Meridian's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the marble floor, where Amara had been handcuffed just hours earlier, she faces the remaining crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who has transformed trauma into triumph. The viral videos of her arrest have already been viewed millions of times, but the narrative has completely shifted from the capture of a criminal to the exposure of systemic injustice. "Before you leave here today," Amara says, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom, "I want to challenge each of you to become part of the solution rather than silent witnesses to the problem." She walks to the center of the lobby, commanding attention not through volume, but through presence. "If you witness discrimination, whether it's a black woman being falsely accused, a person of color being profiled, or anyone being treated differently because of how they look, speak up immediately. Your voice has power, especially when it defends someone who society tries to silence." An attorney from Diana's team approaches with tablets containing preliminary legal documents. "Document everything safely," Amara continues, gesturing toward the devices that had recorded her humiliation and vindication. "Record when it's safe to do so. Report officially through proper channels. Remember that false accusations based on race and gender are serious federal crimes with real consequences. Support black women-owned businesses," she adds with conviction. "Economic empowerment prevents situations like this because it's harder to victimize people who control their own economic destiny. When we own the businesses, we can eliminate the toxic cultures that enable discrimination." A guest raises her hand. "Miss Thompson, what can we do in our own workplaces?" "Demand intersectional bias training." Amara responds immediately. "Most diversity programs focus on race or gender separately, but as you saw today, black women face unique challenges that require specific attention. Push for policies that address multiple forms of discrimination simultaneously." She pulls out her phone, now returned to her possession, and shows the social media feeds where her story is trending. "Use your platforms to amplify stories like this. Share experiences that expose bias and celebrate victories over discrimination. Visibility creates accountability." "But perhaps most importantly," she continues, her voice becoming more personal, "examine your own assumptions. Ask yourself hard questions. When you see successful black women, do you wonder how we really got our achievements? Do you assume we must have taken shortcuts or received special treatment?" The question hangs in the air, forcing uncomfortable self-reflection among the listeners. "Teach your children that black women deserve the presumption of innocence and respect," Amara adds. "Show them examples of black women in leadership, in business, in positions of power. Help them understand that our success isn't surprising. It's inevitable when barriers are removed." Diana steps forward with the confidence of someone who has spent decades fighting these battles in courtrooms across the country. The legal system worked today because Ms. Thompson had resources to fight back, but thousands of others face similar discrimination without the same advantages. Support organizations that provide legal aid and advocacy for those who can't afford private attorneys. Amara nods toward her legal team. What happened here today will result in policy changes throughout the Thompson Hospitality Group's 31 properties. But real change requires individual commitment from every person in every organization. She looks directly at the cameras still recording, knowing her words will reach far beyond this lobby. To every black woman watching this, remember, you belong in every space you choose to enter. Your success doesn't need justification. Your presence doesn't require permission. Your achievements aren't accidents. They tried to make me small today, she continues, her voice growing stronger. They tried to reduce me to their stereotypes and assumptions, but we don't shrink to fit other people's limited imaginations. A final guest approaches, a young black woman who had been watching from the edge of the crowd. Ms. Thompson, how do we keep going when the discrimination feels overwhelming? Amara's smile is genuine and warm. We remember that every time someone underestimates us, they're giving us an advantage. Their prejudice blinds them to our capabilities. Their assumptions become our opportunities. Black women have always been underestimated, she concludes, her voice carrying across the lobby and into the phones broadcasting her words around the world. That's their mistake, not our limitation. Success isn't stolen. It's earned through talent, determination, and refusing to accept other people's definitions of our worth. Respect isn't optional. It's required. Our power isn't surprising. It's the natural result of competence meeting opportunity. And our presence in spaces of influence isn't temporary. It's permanent. As the crowd disperses, many stopping to exchange contact information and commit to staying engaged with the broader issues Amara has raised, the Grand Meridian Hotel begins its transformation from a symbol of discrimination to a beacon of change. The woman who had been arrested as a suspected criminal just hours before now stands as both owner and advocate, having turned personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic reform. The viral videos that had been meant to shame her instead became testimony to her strength, and the hotel that had tried to exclude her is now the foundation for her vision of a more equitable industry. Justice, as it turns out, has a sense of irony, and sometimes it comes with compound interest.